Malcolm Hoenlein's with us. We call this the Weekly Update, Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. Mr. Hoenlein, welcome back to JM and the AM.
Thank you. Great to be with you, as always.
Appreciate that very much. A couple of things from last week that, well, actually, there are a couple, but right now I'll just bring up one. We never explored the news story that really hit. It's funny. It hit the media in the most mild-mannered fashion. Then all of a sudden, Thursday and Friday of last week, it exploded. I'm talking about the plot in Michigan, a similar one or related, depending on which news account you read, in New Jersey, where there were a terror plot that was quelled, that was discovered, and authorities were able to stop it in its progress. And those of us who watched all of that with concern wonder how commonplace this is. Do you think this is an exception, or do you think there's constant attempts that authorities in this country need to extinguish?
Well, I don't think it's an either-or situation. Actually, this morning, the Canadian police announced that they had prevented some sort of an attack also, and it's happening with greater and greater frequency. So the fact that the media did not cover it more, and there was a lot of competing stories, says a lot. And the problem is you become inured to it. It becomes too commonplace. It's a mistake. You can't just accept that this is the way it is, or not to be horrified each time a new plot against elected officials, against individuals, comes up. And it's happening around the world, of course, but we're just not used to it. And so it doesn't have the shock value that it used to have. You know, if somebody was targeted for something, there would be headlines and, police mobilization and police assigned to protect people. Today, it's a much more accepting environment. And it's reflective in the radicalization in society, the availability of weapons, but also of foreign involvement.
It seems like the authorities here in the U.S. are much better prepared for these types of things than when it looked like, 5-10 years ago, they were more caught off guard by these episodes. Do you agree with that, or I'm giving them too much credit?
I think people are more aware of the possibility. The problem is that we still only get a percentage of potential attack or attackers. You see how many arrests there are of people who carry out, and they go to their homes and they find weapons, right, and often heavy duty weapons, which because somebody executed an event unsuccessfully, or even successfully, if in terms of eliminating themselves, that we find out. And then the interlocking networks that are established, that usually they say it's a lone wolf, and the mother expresses shock at what then they find out. They go online, check their computers, and see that in fact they have been in touch with people that they were indoctrinated in extremist things. And why we take so seriously what is happening in our schools, what is happening in society as a whole. We've gone through a week with one incident after another, whether at Heritage or whether with the Bonhoeffer comments by Tucker Carlson and the Fuentes stuff. I mean, all these things are reaching millions and millions of young people. And anybody who thinks that they're not affected and infected by it is making a mistake.
You mentioned Toronto before. We were horrified by the decision to fly the Palestinian flag over Toronto City Hall. First of all, just confirm for me that it's an accurate story, because you never know on social media what's correct, what's true and not true these days. And secondly, Toronto, major city, big Jewish community, etc. What's your comment regarding their decision to do that?
Well, Toronto is a great Jewish community. It's an active Jewish community. But the fact is that, remember that Canada has a strong French influence, that we have seen this process of radicalization. Toronto, if you remember on this show, maybe 20 years ago, I spoke and more based on information we've been getting and the open door policy of Canada, that Toronto became the second biggest presence of Hezbollah outside of the Middle East. And it was because they had allowed people to come in freely. They settled around the Toronto area. And so you have this large concentration there already, and why we've had many incidents and why the escalating violence of the demonstrations in Montreal and Toronto, just like in places in the United States. So it doesn't come as a surprise that these incidents take place. Remember, there are places across America today, from Patterson to Texas to Michigan to Seattle, getting a Mamdani candidate, that are similarly seeing the manifestations of extremism tied to anti-Jewish hatred, but it's anti-American at its core. And that's the message I think that we have to get out to the American people, is that this is not, Jews may be the first victims, we're never the last. And as I said on several interviews this week, I believe that we should not let heritage become a Jewish event. It's not. It's heritage's internal event that they have to decide what they're going to do. But we have to use it to highlight that this is anti-American at its core, that you have the anti-Semitism on the right as you have anti-Semitism on the left. And we've been focused on the left because it was more visible and more virulent, when in fact today you see the expressions on the extreme right as well. So it's something that, when Senator Moynihan 50 years ago wrote a book and he talked about dumbing deviancy down, that we have destroyed the standards, things that would have horrified people, as you say, even the violence, right. Does not anymore, has no shock value. And people, can often hum it or just dismiss, quote, another incident, when in fact that should not be the reaction. And we should not be making this a Jewish issue. This should be about what is the soul of heritage? What is their mandate? How do they live up to their responsibility? Why are they hosting it? What foreign influences are involved in all of these things? What funding is coming in to some people engage in it? And to show the American people this is their challenge. This is undermining the basic values of our country. And we're raising a generation that doesn't know anything. So if you tell them Bonhoeffer, who tried to kill Hitler, gets criticized for that and said it's unchristian and all the things that were said, why this is a poisoning of the next generation.
Yeah. I mean, I think some of the issue is, and I know that it's only some of it, and you and I have discussed things like this in the past, but I think there's a misplacement of priorities. And misplacement's the wrong word. There's a debate over priorities. And this, what you just described, is such a priority for our community for obvious reasons. And there are many people, especially many commentators now in the U.S., some responsible and others not so responsible, who would say this is simply not a priority for them. And they would never they would never dream of doing something, against the Jewish community. But this is a Jewish issue and not an American issue. In fact, your perspective of that this is an American issue, I think is one of the most important things that you tell us here all the time. We can't ignore the fact that this is an issue important to America today and in its future.
And when we see the things that happened here in New York and the exit polls, asking people why there are Mamdani's anti-Jewish, anti-Israel stands, and a third say they support them, or many identify, even a greater number could identify with it, and that it's not a reason why 90% of people wouldn't vote against somebody who holds the views that he holds, and the fact that, his pie-in-the-sky proposals we already see are being shot down, the free buses, the free other thing, and Hochul now says that it's not possible. Yeah. But when you go, you see in two Muslim student organizations in Virginia, in Fairfax, you see the Harvard magazine, you see all these things that, despite all the exposure about anti-Semitism on our campuses, and you see university presidents acknowledging that, in fact, there was foreign funding and that most of their students did not participate, and that minorities were, it was really foreign students and foreign funding talking about organized networks that are involved in those demonstrations, which we and said and identified a long time ago on this program, and trying to get the message out and getting Congress and others to act. And they did take some steps against CARE, and we find now that CARE is being looked at for having stolen or misused or engaged in fraud with huge amounts of federal funding that they were given. And yet you don't see a headline on it. You don't see the kind of mobilization about it. Thank God there are some members of Congress and others who are willing to step out and step up and address it. You remember what Stefanik did with the university presidents.
Yeah.
There aren't that many people ready to do that today.
It's going to be a tight race between her and the governor, right?
It'll be a tight race first between her and Bruce Blakeman.
Right. Well, did he announce he's for sure running?
He's traveling around the country around the state, doing exploration,
right,
and has indicated his interest in it. I think they're not declared. She did declare this week, as did Hochul, but both are great friends, and we don't want to see a bloodbath between them. It could strengthen the party if you have a constructive debate between them, and I'm sure others may get into the race yet as well. But I hope that it's not, they don't divide the vote, and that we both can go around and advance the views that they have, both professed and practiced, both been courageous supporters, certainly of the Jewish people, Jewish community, and of Israel. We need to have positive debates, but I don't want to see Israel and Jews be put in the center so that the negative forces then take advantage of that in order to undermine support and to spread the lies and the distortions and misrepresentations that have become so commonplace. And truth is the victim. And when truth in a democracy is a victim, you know that corrupts the whole system.
It's a good point you're raising. We have to be thankful that if there is a bloodbath of a campaign like we anticipate, even though you're praying it won't be one, it's likely that Israel will not be an issue on the agenda, right? Safe to say, based on both of their track records?
But I think both of them don't want it. They're both decent people. They're not going to want to do a Mamdani-type campaign, right, or have a knockout like you had in the Democratic parties where they were going at each other's throats rather than focusing on the opposition.
Right.
And I don't think that will be the case.
America's one and only Jewish Moments in the Morning radio program, heard on listener-sponsored digital radio around the world, the web at NachumSegal.com and the Nachum Segal Network, and, of course, the beloved NSN app. Malcolm Hoenlein's with us. Reminder, our fundraiser is now active, our year-end fundraiser. Give what you can, especially if you like the programming, Friday and every other day. FJBunity.org, or go to the top of NachumSegal.com and click on the year-end banner. And, of course, we thank you. What did Malcolm Hoenlein think of the visit of the president of Syria to Washington, D.C.?
Well, I think, we're glorifying somebody who a short while ago had a $10 million bounty on his head for his involvement in terrorism. And it's still to be proven. Has he gone through this amazing metamorphosis, just because he put on a suit and that somehow changed him? Or is he how he conducts himself and what long-term policies he will institute? Remember, he's not supported broadly in Syria. You have a lot of the opposition groups are very much against him, but he has the support of the United States right now, and the president clearly enamored with him and hosted him. But it was interesting to me that he didn't come up through the regular portal. He was taken in through the side door into the White House. And, symbolism means a lot. Now, it could be that we're doing construction there. It could be other things. Right. But to me, symbolism is always important. Second is how we will treat the minority groups. And, Israel has been the defender of the Druze, Kurds, others, the Christians, the Alawites. They are still very much opposed to him. And they would like to overthrow him and get rid of this regime because they look at the ties he has still to a lot of these negative groups. He's also very much in the orbit of the pro-Turkey and And the U.S. Special Envoy to Syria has been very positive in promoting him and trying to get everybody to come in under his flag. And they're not going to, because they saw the massacres of the Alawites, and they saw the massacre of Druze that took place. Had they not had some weapons, the toll would have been much higher in terms of the Druze.
He made it clear he's not interested in the Abraham Accords. That was playing to his home base?
Well, in part, but he didn't say he wasn't interested. He's trying to use it to leverage about he said he has to have the return of the Golan. That is not going to happen. And if they decide to opt out of this thing, it's his loss. Syria's economy is in shambles. I don't see Russia running in to give them economic aid. And in fact, Russia has been more or less sidelined there. Iran has been sidelined, although they still continue to send weapons through and try to get to Lebanon, and the Syrian forces have not done enough on the border, though they have tried to stop a few cases of weapons which are still getting through. But Sharat, in this visit, did not get what he wanted. He wanted to dropping all the Caesar's policy, which was the sanctions against him. They removed a lot of it, but not all of it, and that is very important for the people in Syria, that there is still the hesitancy and a recognition that the guy has to prove himself, and we have to see what direction they go. We know in Idlib, where he ruled before, the Islamist policies were instituted. Girls didn't get education after, I think 12 years older, and they would walk around in burqas and et cetera. And much of the population in Syria is, in fact, secular. The Iranians brought in a lot of Shiite and did a population replacement. Again, no UN resolutions on that. And hundreds and hundreds of thousands are refugees. Many tens and perhaps hundreds of thousands were killed. So Syria is still in the throes of, I think, of shifting relationships. They need a strong leader now to pull the country together. The president likes strong leaders. He says it about Erdogan. He said it about Shara. But we also have to look at what is his position, what is his ideology. And Senator Lindsey Graham was very effective in seeing to it that we just didn't give a complete, get out of jail free card.
I thought the president was enamored with him or acting the way he did around him because he's his ticket to the Nobel Peace Prize. If he gets Syria to come to the table for the Abraham Accords and it goes through, then that may be the checkmate for his ultimate goal. So, I mean, enamored, it sounds like he has this, unjustified affection for him. I think it's simply that he views him as a key to getting to where he needs to get to, right?
Very well could be. Remember that this is not the first time. It's the second time he met him. It's the first time a Syrian president has been at the White House in probably 40 years, 50 years, whatever. And it is symbolic that he gets invited. Now, it could be a message to others in the region because we need his help vis-a-vis Lebanon. Right. And you saw that the U.S. envoy Barak was very tough on the Lebanese in the last couple of weeks. And Ortega, who is the special envoy for Lebanon, was there and also talked about their responsibilities to shore up what they're supposed to do along the border, to stop to go after the weapons, the confiscation of weapons. Those are all issues, and everything, as you know, in the Middle East is interrelated. So I think the president does do things on a personal basis. I think he has a vision for the region. I don't think he's just going to sell out because of the Nobel Prize. He's going to get that if he can get a settlement in Gaza and build an international force and even stabilize the parties. For Syria is not going to come in to the Abraham Accords now under these circumstances. Though I do think other countries might eventually. I mean, Lebanon would not be able to do it also, but if they cooperate and they calm the borders and they prevent the smuggling of weapons and they go after the stockpile of weapons inside the country and go door to door and take the weapons out of the houses, as Israel has asked, and they've refused so far. If they actually achieve that kind of stability, the Nobel Prize could be his anyway.
Interesting. Didn't you find it unusual, his formal request submitted for a Netanyahu pardon?
Unusual is the right word. It is. But I saw today that the Prime Minister welcoming of it and expressed his gratitude. I don't know if he could have done it without. He did mention it, as you know, at the Knesset when the president.
But when you put it in writing, that's frightful.
That's much more formal. Absolutely, it's a different level than an off the cuff remark and say, "Hey, Mr. President, why don't you give the guy a break?"
Yeah, exactly.
and what for cigars and champagne? That's what you're doing. But as he said, and sitting there watching it, I have to tell you, my mouth fell open, and as did most of the others, saying, "What?" and
because the cigar champagne line was the kicker. Like, that was it. That was the cherry on top.
But you're never surprised. And then he wrote there that he has said that he thinks it's doing harm to Israel, that this distraction, and it does distract the prime minister. And, even if they had put it off until after his, term in office or something, but getting it off the table. But I think in Israeli law, you have to admit guilt in order to get a pardon.
Wow.
So would the prime minister then have to acknowledge the charges and in order to get a pardon? These are serious questions.
Another very interesting piece this week with the prime minister in the news. I don't know if you saw this interview, but he was emphatic that he wants to make Israel independent from financial aid. He focused on military aid, but using the argument that really financial aid is a non-issue at this point. You can confirm or deny that for us. And then he said that he just wants he wants to cut off all aid from the United States and make Israel militarily independent. Literally taking it upon themselves, the Israelis, to even manufacture all the weapons on Israeli soil. And he was really strong about this. I have a theory about the timing. What did you think about his declaration?
I agree with your theory about the timing, but no, I don't know what it is. But
my theory is that he sees the America Firsters, and how successful they're being, and how this is going to be a major issue down a very short road, right? Probably in the next presidential election, and feels like this is the time. I mean, why on earth didn't he talk about this in the 90s? Why didn't he talk about it in the year 2000? Why didn't he talk about it in the year 2010? Why is it that all of a sudden he wakes up that this is what Israel needs to do for the benefit of, I would say, not only Israel, but for American Jewry as well?
So this is not without precedent, and I was deeply involved in the efforts to get Israel. The United States offered Israel debt forgiveness at the time of the Iraq War, like they gave $7 billion to Egypt and others. And I went to see the Prime Minister because the Secretary of State called me and said, "Why isn't Israel accepting it?" And I flew over literally for Shabbos. I met with him Shabbos afternoon in his home because my father was sick in the hospital and I had to get right back. And I could not convince him to take the aid. But the whole point was to get off of the dole, not to have to, because most of what we were getting in economic aid was paying the debt service on $7 billion in debt.
Right.
So Israel paid it off, and we get no economic assistance. The only assistance is military. And the vast majority of that, 70%, maybe even more, 80%, is spent here in the United States. Only about $400 million, I think, is allowed for offshore, meaning that they can strengthen Israel's domestic military systems because of the money that from the foreign aid allocations. But remember, it's only military, and they signed under Obama the 10-year deal, which is running out, and we're getting $3 billion a year. In fact, it's more. And I think what the calls have been made about continuing the aid. One of the right-wing commentator influencers, started coming out on it this week. So I think it's not a new issue. And would Israel like to be economically independent? Because they saw during the war when they couldn't get enough shells, when they couldn't get enough of the weapons, and the systems that they're developing are largely Israeli developed. So, we're not going to make F-35s. We still need to buy them and have the money. Israel has emerged economically from where it started and is in a strong position. But I think right now with the burdens that they have, it's not in a position really to sustain their defense system without the economic aid and subsidies that the United States gives. It could be a phase-out program over the next 10 or 15 years, which is the way I think it would work. or might work. But I think the idea of economic independence is, as you said, consistent with the agenda of a lot of people in important positions. But it's not realistic to think that this is something you can just say, tomorrow we're going to do it. You have to wean it off of it, and it is so important, because to produce $3.5 or even more $1 billion worth of free cash, from an economy, it means you have to have 50 times that amount, that you have to tax in order to be able to produce money to be spent in these areas. We can develop the military companies should be developed and export, and they are, and the products are in great demand. But I think it's a complicated issue.
It is a complicated issue, but he also, it's obvious, at least to me, that he sees the landscape in this country. He sees the landscape. He sees what the future brings. And this issue, which again, you basically have confirmed that there's been, tremendous support for this for decades at this point. The level of support we could argue about, but certainly there's been support for it. Now he sees it's come to a head and there's no choice. I found it fascinating that he spoke about it as emphatically as he did, when I don't remember the last time he even addressed the issue. Certainly not addressed this side of the issue. If anything, he was defending why it's a good idea for the United States to, maintain this presence or this relationship with the only democracy in the Middle East, et cetera, et cetera. So I found it very interesting. In fact, it was a little bit scary, because if he, the prime minister, who's very familiar with the U.S., feels that this is the direction the country here is going through, now I understand better why he and others, including Rav Stav, who was in my studio here on Monday, are encouraging people to get to Israel as soon as possible.
Well, I think that's a separate issue, but I think you're right on the first part. And it could be that this is a way to let off some of the steam that he feels building up in the United States, right, by saying that, that Israel's looking at it and looking thing. Or on the other hand, you could just turn up the heat on that steam, because they're saying, look, even the prime minister acknowledges that they have to go in that direction. Why? I was surprised that he did it now, especially because of the pressures on Israel's economy, on Israel's military. The dangers have not gone away. We're seeing the Shiite ring of fire being replaced by a Sunni ring of fire, that the Houthis announced that they're going to stop shooting, but that is, they're dead all the time. They're regrouping. That's Iran's danger has not been eliminated, and a lot of people feel that we're going to go into another round with them. And the truth is that you want Israel to be independent. You want Israel to be the closest ally with the United States because of friendship, but not because, we get assistance, which puts you in a somewhat subservient relationship. And you're right. Reading the mood in the country.
Right. But you just made my point so much stronger. I never even thought of that. I mean, we're talking about post-war. We're talking about the most sensitive time to start making a proposal to start that weaning process that you described. And he still felt it was worth going out there emphatically and making a statement like that. So I think it only helps my argument.
I am saying I agree with you.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying I never even thought of that part. Right. You're just reinforcing it for me.
That's why you have me on.
That's exactly right. I need you for clarity. We all need you for clarity. Thank God another set of remains, if you will. Mendy Goddard was returned to Israel, somebody who was murdered from Kibbutz Be'eri. His wife was murdered as well. It leaves Ron Guli, Dror Or, and Shustasik Rintalak as the three hostage remains that Israel still awaits. It's interesting. I was wrong on this. And you were right, because I conjectured that because of the war and the perception of disorganization of this haphazard terrorist group, Hamas, I was under the impression that there's no way they have the remains of, most of these hostages. I guess they're a lot more organized as a military effort than I thought. And the value of these bodies, as much as we know how valuable they are to the enemy, this really does confirm just how valuable they are. Odds are they know the location of the final three?
Yes, likely. And I think it's part of the process that we underestimate our enemies.
Right, correct.
And the fact is that we learn now that Israel knew where many of the bodies were, but couldn't attack because they were being guarded. And, of course, with the living ones, didn't want to endanger them further. But so Israeli intelligence was also very good. And when they said, you remember initially the Hamas kept saying, we don't know where they are, and Israel saying, yeah, but we know where they are, and we'll help you find them if you need it. And then they quickly, but you notice how they dribble it out so they keep the story going as long as possible. And remember that that Palestinian bodies and terrorists are released
every time is a release
basis as well. It doesn't even make the news, but in fact it's happening each time. And
it's really the only incentive. Otherwise, they wouldn't even bother with the remains at this point. It's out of the headlines, right? Or they can cause it to be out of the headlines. But I guess they feel there's some benefit because they have families that want, certain remains back and certain prisoners released.
Yeah, but there's also pressure on the other side from the parties, the Qataris, the Turks, and others.
Are they still paying attention to it? I thought this deal is dead already. The way I haven't heard a word about anybody actually putting pressure on Hamas in Gaza in the last week or two.
Well, because it becomes so commonplace, but I'm saying that they want to show that they are, in fact, able to control and they want to rebuild Gaza. They all want to get in on the billions of dollars of redevelopment money.
So that's real. So that's real. There are countries that feel there's potential there.
There are. Egypt certainly is drooling over the billions in reconstruction. So are others. But also remember that there is a competition for dominance. And now they're saying with the vacuum of Iran's ring of fire having been set back so much that the Sunni ring of fire with Turkey and Qatar, funding it, and with elements in different countries. Syria is, for instance, up for grabs. And we don't know what the ultimate outcome. You look at what India is doing. India's relations with Israel, buying weapons, but more importantly, want to build the link to Europe through Israel and Saudi Arabia. It will make a dramatic change. It'll be a competition to the road and belt. And you see also, by the way, China and Russia's roles much more contained than people would have estimated, and especially in Syria, which have been so beholden and involved with them. So when you look at what's happening inside Gaza, it's much more complicated, I think, than people assume.
You think there'll be a U.S. Army base in Gaza or near Gaza? Because that's also driving certain people crazy in this country. Do you think it's actually going to happen?
I do. I think that there could be a base in Israel, but it'll be a coordination base. It's not going to be a fighting base.
Right.
It's not going to be, where people are, American troops are not going into Gaza. That was the president's commitment.
Yeah, but the question is, will there be American troops in harm's way? That's the question.
No, they will be in Israel. They can go into Gaza, periodically to check on things, but they're not going to be a fighting force. That's why we want international forces there. I saw that Indonesia today announced that they were prepared, I think, send 10,000 troops. And people, please note Indonesia's role, and we'll come back to it when you'll all understand why. But I think it's a very key element for many reasons. And seeing other parties that might come into this who don't have diplomatic relations or relations with Israel per se. So it's a lot of moving parts, in all of this.
No question about it. Thank God, tens of thousands of people in Hebron this Shabbos. If you would have told our predecessors a couple of decades ago, well, not a couple, but a few decades ago, that this would be the case, they never would have believed it.
I think that's true. Nobody would have believed that it was possible, and we look at the changes that have taken place. Look at Iran's economic conditions. The fact that
why they're any different?
Remember how long I've talked about?
Yeah, but I'm saying, is it
the drought,
right?
In particular, people can live without a lot of things. They can't live without water,
right?
And Tehran now is being slowly starved of water, and of the 10 reservoirs that feed it, I think 3 are already closed or dribbling, and they're going to start, having to ration water like they do electricity. So Iran's internal situation is deteriorates, and they step up the executions. It's well over 1,500 already. And they, that they've instituted a law that anybody who visited Israel gets a 4-year term. They just reduced it to a 2-year term. And there is an American who was in visiting family there, an American Iranian Jewish who was arrested. And now the lawyers are saying, look, the law was enacted 7 years before he would visit Israel. 7 years before the law was enacted. You can't retroactively sentence him over in Iran. You can do whatever you want. Our hope is that he will get out. But you see the crackdown domestically and the decreasing support that they have. And unfortunately, there isn't a unified opposition, or the opposition that exists is not unified enough. There are steps to bring them together, but it's not unified enough now, even though the majority of the country wants to get rid of this regime. And I think the majority in the Middle East want to see the regime gone and would welcome and even support efforts to do that. So there's so many moving parts of what's happening in Iraq, where we're seeing in one part radicalization, and again, some of the language that we used to hear from Iraq. And then on the other hand, you have outreach by the United States with Iraq, and the Houthis announcing unilaterally that they're going to stop shooting at ships. I don't believe it, but they have suffered so much, and they have no economy, they have no domestic production, so they need it for their own purposes. So there are a lot of moving parts right now that we'll have to see, and that's why we need a strong till on the hand on the till in Washington, and we need Congress to be solid and to be out there supporting the elements. It's a chance to change if we support the minorities in Syria. They can put pressure, even if they don't overthrow Shara, at least to move the country in the right direction, where minority rights would be protected, and many of them want relations with Israel. The Druze have developed their own flag, which is 2 blue stripes with some writing or something in the middle.
Wow.
And they demonstrate with Israeli flags openly. So it's an interesting time.
You could say that again. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Shabbos, and we'll speak again next week.
God willing. Be well.
Malcolm Hoenlein with us. Weekly update. Boy, there's a lot going on, isn't there? Don't forget our year-end fundraiser. If you like the weekly update, if you love our Friday program, if you like our program all through the week, if you love the Nachum Segal Network and its 24-hour presence and all the great shows that we have, now is the time to support us as the year-end campaign has kicked off. Go to NachumSegal.com, click on the banner at the top of the page, and toss in your donation, or just go to fjbunity.org, fjbunity.org.